Most people think mountains are just beautiful forests, hiking trails, quiet towns hidden beneath fog. And during the day, that's usually all they seem to be. But the deeper you dig into the history of certain places, the stranger things become. Because there's a reason some trails stay empty. A reason locals avoid certain areas after dark. And it's not just because of bears, cliffs, or bad weather. Over the years, thousands of people have disappeared inside mountain ranges all over the world. Some are eventually found. Most aren't. But what makes those cases disturbing is how often the survivors describe the exact same things. A feeling of being watched deep in the woods. Hearing their name called from somewhere between the trees. Moments where the entire forest suddenly goes silent. Like every animal around them sensed something first. And then there's the panic. That overwhelming feeling that something is nearby. Even when there's nothing there. Mountains are already dangerous enough on their own. Dense forests. Hidden cave systems. Abandoned mines. Steep cliffs. Terrain that can completely disorient even experienced hikers within minutes. But according to people who've spent enough time out there, sometimes the danger isn't the mountain itself. Sometimes it's whatever's living underneath it. Ethan never believed stories like that. He thought people just scared themselves in isolated places. Your brain hears a strange noise in the woods, and suddenly every shadow feels alive. At least, that's what he believed before Black Ridge National Park. Ethan was 28, worked seasonal jobs whenever he needed money, and spent most of his free time hiking isolated trails across national parks. The more dangerous the trail looked, the more interested he became. He loved being alone in places most people avoided. No signal. No traffic. No people. Just miles of trees and silence. And that's exactly what led him to Black Ridge National Park. The park sat deep in the mountains several hours from the nearest town. Massive forests stretched for miles in every direction, broken up by cliffs, abandoned mining routes, and cave systems buried beneath the earth. Locals avoided certain areas of the park, especially the north trails. Online forums were full of strange stories about that side of the mountain. Hikers claimed they heard metallic noises beneath the ground late at night. Deep knocking sounds. Scraping. Echoes coming from somewhere underneath the earth. Most people blamed old mining tunnels collapsing underground. Ethan thought the stories were stupid. That was his first mistake. The second was ignoring the weather warnings. Rain had been hammering the mountains for almost 2 straight days before he arrived. Mud covered the roads leading to the trailhead, and several warning signs near the ranger station mentioned unstable terrain and possible rock slides. But Ethan had already driven 6 hours to get there. He wasn't about to turn around because of some rain. Before he started hiking, one of the older park rangers stopped him near the trail map. The guy looked exhausted. Not tired. Uneasy. Like he hadn't slept properly in days. He asked Ethan where he planned on hiking. The north trails, Ethan answered casually. The ranger's face changed immediately. Not dramatically. Just enough for Ethan to notice. You shouldn't be out there after a storm, the ranger said quietly. Ethan shrugged. I've hiked worse. The ranger stared at him for another second before speaking again. That mountain shifts after heavy rain. Something about the way he said it felt strange. Like he wanted to explain more, but decided not to. Then he added, if the ground starts making noise, you run. Ethan laughed awkwardly, thanked him, and headed up the trail. But even hours later, that warning stayed in the back of his mind. By noon, he was deep inside the forest. And the deeper he went, the quieter everything became. No birds. No insects. No wind. Just the sound of his boots sinking into wet mud. At first, Ethan told himself he was imagining it. Forests get quiet sometimes. That wasn't unusual. Still, something about the silence felt wrong. Like the woods were listening. The farther north he climbed, the stranger the terrain became. Huge cracks split through the earth in random places, some only inches wide, others deep enough that his flashlight couldn't reach the bottom. Several times, he caught himself staring into those openings longer than he meant to. Because every now and then, he thought he heard something moving beneath them. Around 4 in the afternoon, Ethan found something interesting. A narrow canyon hidden behind fallen trees and loose rock. There were no official trail markers nearby, but fresh footprints in the mud suggested other hikers had gone through recently. That was enough for him. He followed the canyon inward. The walls tightened the deeper he went. Massive slabs of rock leaned overhead, blocking out most of the sunlight until everything looked dark and gray. The air felt colder there. Heavy. Almost damp. That's when he heard it. Thunk. Ethan stopped walking immediately. The sound echoed somewhere far below him. A few seconds later. Thunk. Thunk. Deep. Metallic. Like something striking stone underground. His stomach tightened instantly. And for the first time all day, he remembered the ranger's warning. If the ground starts making noise, you run. Ethan stood completely still, listening. Nothing. Just silence again. He pulled out his flashlight even though it was still daylight. That's when the earthquake hit. The ground beneath him exploded violently. A deafening crack ripped through the canyon walls as rocks collapsed from above. Ethan barely had time to react before the earth disappeared underneath him. He fell screaming into darkness. The drop only lasted a few seconds. But the landing nearly killed him. His body slammed against solid rock hard enough to knock the air from his lungs instantly. Everything went black. When he woke up, he couldn't breathe properly. Dust filled the air so thick it burned his throat. He coughed violently and reached around until his fingers found the flashlight nearby. The beam flickered weakly to life. And that's when the panic hit him. He was trapped. The opening above him had completely collapsed beneath tons of rock and debris. Jagged stones surrounded him on every side, leaving barely enough room to sit upright. It felt less like a cave, and more like a grave. No! Ethan screamed. His voice echoed violently around the cramped space. He clawed at the rocks desperately, tearing skin from his fingers trying to move them. Nothing budged. The reality of the situation settled in slowly. No signal. No way out. And possibly nobody who even knew where he was. Ethan forced himself to breathe slowly before he completely lost control. Panic would waste oxygen. He checked his supplies carefully. One flashlight. Half a bottle of water. A pocket knife. A dying phone with no service. And pain shooting through his left leg every time he moved. Possibly broken. For the next hour, he screamed for help until his throat became raw. Nobody answered. Eventually, the silence became worse than the fear. Because silence meant nobody was coming. At some point, night fell outside. Not that it mattered underground. The darkness beyond the flashlight beam felt endless. Wrong somehow. Every time Ethan shut the flashlight off to conserve battery, the darkness immediately felt alive. Like something was standing inches away from him. Watching. Waiting for the light to disappear. He couldn't handle it for more than a minute before turning the flashlight back on again. Sometime after midnight, he heard the first sound. Scrape. Very soft. Ethan froze instantly. The sound came again. Scrape. Somewhere nearby. He slowly turned the flashlight toward a narrow crack in the rock wall beside him. The opening was tiny. Barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. The scraping stopped immediately. Ethan stared at the crack for almost a full minute. Nothing moved. Eventually, he convinced himself it was just shifting rocks. That explanation helped. For a little while. Then he heard breathing. Not his own. Slow. Wet. Close. Every muscle in his body locked up. He aimed the flashlight back toward the crack. At first, he saw nothing. Then something moved deep inside the darkness. A shape. Human-sized. Crawling. The movement looked wrong immediately. Its limbs bent at strange angles against the stone like its bones didn't fit correctly beneath its skin. Ethan stopped breathing. The thing froze the second the flashlight touched it. Then slowly, it backed away into darkness. Ethan didn't sleep after that. He just sat there shaking, gripping the flashlight so tightly his fingers hurt. Hours passed. Maybe longer. Time didn't feel real anymore underground. The cave grew colder and colder until Ethan could see his own breath. Then, he heard voices. Faint at first. Somewhere above him. People shouting. Rescue teams. Relief hit him so hard he nearly cried. Help, he screamed. I'm down here. The voices faded. Then silence returned. A few minutes later, the shouting came back. Closer this time. Ethan. He almost started laughing from relief. I'm here, he screamed desperately. A voice answered back. We found you. Something about the voice felt wrong immediately. Too calm. Too flat. Like someone pretending to sound human. Ethan's smile slowly disappeared. Then the voice said, Don't move. A long pause followed. Then, we're coming inside. Inside. The words hit him like ice water. Because the voice wasn't coming from above him anymore. It was coming from inside the cave. Behind the crack in the wall. Ethan slowly turned the flashlight toward the opening. The beam landed on pale fingers gripping the stone. Then a face appeared. Almost human. Its skin looked stretched too tightly across its skull, and its eyes reflected the flashlight like an animal caught in headlights. But the worst part was the smile. Because it was trying to copy one. Ethan, it whispered softly. More scraping echoed deeper in the darkness behind it. Not one creature. Several. The thing began forcing itself through the narrow crack, bones snapping loudly as its body twisted unnaturally against the stone. Ethan screamed and grabbed the pocket knife. The flashlight flickered once. Twice. The creature kept crawling closer. Its jaws slowly opened wider than any human mouth should. Then the flashlight died. Complete darkness swallowed everything. And from somewhere all around him, voices began whispering his name. Dozens of them. Soft. Patient. Getting closer. Ethan's body was never found. 3 weeks later, rescue crews finally cleared the collapse site. The cave beneath the canyon was completely empty. No backpack. No blood. No bones. Nothing. Officially, Ethan was declared missing. But one ranger later reported hearing strange noises while inspecting the tunnels beneath the mountain. Deep knocking sounds. Far underground. Thunk. 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 Like something was still moving beneath the earth. Waiting for the next person to fall inside.